First of all, I want to say what an honor it is to be here. I have been interested in wireless networking for a number of years. I'm proud to say that my entire house doesn't have any networked cables in it at all. And I appreciate all the work that the community has done in moving forward wireless networking in general. I also like grassroots groups very much. Linux, of course, was a grassroots movement. Free software itself was a grassroots movement. It's been around a lot longer than a lot of people know about. A lot of people think it started with Richard Stallman. That isn't true. It started many, many years ago, even before when I was a college student in 1969. There were people writing free software and giving it out because they felt that it would help other people do their work. And likewise, they would benefit because those people might make the software better for their own purposes. And I like grassroots groups because they have passion. And passion, I think, is very important to any organization. When I was a college student, and even before that, I started reading science fiction. Some of the great authors of science fiction, Ayn Rand, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein, all of them talking about the future and what it would be. I bought every Popular Mechanics and Popular Science magazine that came out. I read about all the rocket belts that we were going to be flying around with, surely by the late 1970s, and how we were all going to have propelled cars and things like that. But one thing that I didn't really count on very much was the fact that the computers that I was programming on in 1969 that would fill this room with vacuum tubes and yet provide you all of 4K of memory might someday be on the wristwatch that I wear on my wrist and give you even more computational power than those machines that weighed several tons and cost many millions of dollars. But of all the science fiction writers that I read, I think probably the one that most inspired myself and a whole series of people of my era was, of course, Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek. Star Trek was an interesting TV show. Many people liked it and hated it, at the same time. But one of the things that always really got to me about Star Trek was this implied principle that people did not have to work for a living because you had unlimited energy with the lithium crystals and you had the replicator. And so all of life's basic needs could be met with these two things, unlimited energy and the replicator. You need food, replicated. You need clothing, replicated. You need housing, replicated. Everything was fine. The only problem with replicators was that they could only replicate things that already existed. Ever think about that? Where does the new wine come in? Where does the new thing come from? You still had to have people who could invent and innovate. And then after they produced it one time, then the replicator could make a copy of it. Of course, unless the replicator went crazy, in which case it created an android or, some other freak of nature or something like that. But normally it was done by people who wanted to work. Now, Captain Picard, I think, was one of my favorite captains of all the Enterprise. And he had a brother. What did his brother do? His brother ran a winery, a vineyard. And his brother would be out there digging in the dirt while Jean-Luc was out flying amongst the stars, right? And his brother would say, so you go out there flying amongst the stars. And Jean-Luc would come back and say, why are you here in digging with your hands in the dirt? Well, his brother was doing the same type of investigative work, growing new grapes, making new wines, as Jean-Luc was in flying through space. Unfortunately, in today's world, we have no dilithium crystals and no replicator. We're still with our feet in the mire of the vineyard. And there's a lot of people who don't have the capabilities that we have in a first world society. When I say first world society and third world societies, I'll talk about the Indian tribes of North America and their reservations. I talk about Center City, Chicago. I talk about Appalachia. Poverty knows no national boundaries. Now, one of the nice things about Star Trek was that they showed that not every communications answer solved every solution or every problem. If you're going through with a simple question, you can simply tap your communications badge and say, "Computer, what is the distance to the nearest star?" And the computer would come back and say, "It is 3.7 light years to the nearest star." Oh, that was great. Simple question, simple answer. Tap it again. You're in the turbo lift along with Captain Janeway. "What's the results of my latest medical exam?" "You have 57 venereal diseases and 18 of them are alien." That was the time you went off to your stateroom and you sat down to your personal log and said, "Are any of those treatable?" And of course you had the tricorder that recorded all sorts of interesting data. No matter what you aimed at, I could tell you everything about everything, but it was processed by the main computer up in the starship, right? You didn't have all of the communications there. In effect, the tricorder was kind of like a thin client, right? Gathering up the information. And then a lot of times you had the workstation. Now, we in the computer industry, we think a workstation is a Spark Solaris computer system with a nice 30-inch tube or something like that, you know, and all that type of stuff. And we give it a mouse and a keyboard, we call it a workstation. That's not a workstation. A workstation is a place that is specifically built to do a specific job. And you go there because it has all the facilities you need to do that job. Now, if you were attacked in some type of ambush or something like that and beamed up, they didn't beam you up to the bridge. That's not the workstation for fixing you. They beamed you to sick bay. That's where the doctor had all the stuff necessary to help make you better. On the other hand, if you wanted to do navigation, you didn't go to, sick bay. You went to navigation, where they had all these special features. And we need to think about the special features that people need to do their jobs when we start to talk about bringing information and communications to people. When we start to think about communications and people in emerging economies, we have to ask ourselves, do we have to develop a whole spreadsheet while we're sitting there on the airplane? Or can we take the spreadsheet that we've done in some other place back at our workstation and just change a few cells of it, because that's the most important thing we want to do. When we're working with our itinerary that we have on our trip, and again on our PDA, do we have to plan the whole trip on our PDA, or do we just change the last flight because we missed it? We want to know when the next flight is going on. It was funny, I missed an airplane flight one time, and they shuffled our entire airplane over to the counter of the airline, and they were sitting there, and people going up and giving their name, and they were being scheduled on the next plane out, and I says, oh, that next plane is probably going to fill up pretty soon, right? I'm staying in the back of the line with all these people in front of me. I pull out my PDA, I connect to the network, I say, schedule me on the next plane. Make a reservation. And all of a sudden, the people in front of me, they were told over and over again, I'm sorry, the plane is full. I'm sorry, the plane is full. I get up there, oh, yes, Mr. Hall, we have your reservation. It was a rotten trick, but I got on the next plane. When we're in Boston, do we really need to know about finding the pizza parlor in Paris, France? Or likewise, when we reach Paris, do we really need to know about the pizza parlor that's in Boston? One of the things that the internet does for us is it brings us the global environment, but what we might be interested in is the local story. And that's where I think community and the wireless community starts to come in. Now, another science fiction story, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the author. It was actually built, a series of stories built around this, about a whole community of people that never actually touched each other. Yes, sir?
Isaac Asimov, The Naked Sun.
Yes, I think it was, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, this was these people were on this planet, and they had been so long of actually having contact with each other that just having physical contact, or being in the same physical room, and they did everything through holograms. And sometimes I wonder if this is not happening in our society. I remember, you know, when I was younger, you get on the subway and there'd be people riding along, and you talk to them, and they might even talk back to you. And sometimes you get a really interesting conversation. These days, you get on the subway, and the first thing you do, you look around, everybody's got these little earbuds stuck in their ears, and they're listening to their music in their own little environment. And the question is, can we do something to pull them together? The internet allows you to think globally, but what can we do to bring together people locally? So when I come here, I see in this group two main issues. The technical issues of how do we make this internet work better? How do we make it less expensive? How do we make it, you know, base technologies? How do we fund it? How do we get this out to people? And I see the other side of it, the psychological and human aspects of trying to create a community. How do we convince industry and government that this is what they should be doing, instead of just looking out for the profit motive of trying to treat people in as large a group as possible? Because as large a group as possible gives you economies of scale that make things less expensive. It's more expensive to create that local human aspect that gives people the real service that they're talking about. How many of you think that you get less service when you walk into a Walmart or you walk into a large chain supermarket than you used to get by walking into the corner butcher shop where the actual butcher knew your name and knew how you used to use your meat and stuff like that? Yeah. I don't think there's any contest there. Or the local drugstore where the druggist knew what your needs were, knew you were allergic to certain things. And if the doctor brought a prescription, the druggist looked down and say, oh, no, we better look into this again. Because I remember before when you had that problem and, you know, you're allergic to this stuff. The technology solution is very heavily dependent on the economics and physical issues that we have, and it's rapidly evolving, very rapidly evolving. People, they understand the benefits of wireless stuff, and all of the companies are racing ahead to try and get their specific implementation in with the goal of locking out their competitor. And this brings about the type of problem that we have of the beta versus VHS. For those of you so young that you don't remember that, normally beta was considered to be the better format of tape for recording and playing back both audio and video. However, VHS won out because of marketing and economics. Today, or a couple of days ago, yesterday I guess, we were in a conference, and a gentleman brought up the concept of what are we trying to bring people? What happens when you're in India and basically most people sit on the floor? And therefore the normal PC which you give them is not very useful, or not as like they would like to use it, because the PC was kind of designed to sit on a table. It's somebody sitting in a chair. Little things like that can mean the difference between whether you're successful or not. And what happens when, you know, you go down to my favorite place called Brazil, and you find out that the great thing there is to meet together for a barbecue and have a great number of people. I think that more than any other culture, I've had my face photographed in Brazil more than any other. And it's always, please, can I have my picture taken with you? And 15 people gather around. You know, you're all supposed to get into a funny stance and smile, then they take the picture, and everybody's happy. This is part of the culture. It's the way they work, it's the way they live, it's the way they think, right? And we need to be able to address that as well as the technical aspects of it. So what are the real needs of the people, and what are their real desires? Is it more important to give them data, or is it more desirable for them to talk to their grandchildren? One of the things about the One Laptop Per Child project was they said, hey, why does a 6-year-old want to know how to work a word processor or a spreadsheet? They just want to talk to another kid. They want to be able to tell stories back and forth and create, you know, and stimulate their creativeness by doing that. Another project gave them a choice of using a solar panel or a bicycle to generate electricity. We would naturally think about the solar panel. Oh, it's easier, you know, it's great, it's better. But the people asked for the bicycle for a couple reasons. Number one, the bicycle worked at night to generate the power. The bicycle worked on cloudy days, rainy days, generating power. But most importantly, the bicycle gave somebody a job while they were pedaling the bicycle. The solar panel did not. And these are some of the things that are counterintuitive to a lot of other people. And finally, how do we inspire people? With the free software movement, most of the inspiration for writing free software was, I needed it for myself. I needed the software because I wanted a text editor. I needed the software because I needed a cross-compiler. I needed the software because I wanted a better operating system for me to do my work on. That was Linus Torvalds' reason for doing it, and for having fun. He wanted to do it to have fun. But in the community wireless area, what good does it do with one person who has community wireless? You know, if there's only one person in your community, that's not very much of a community. It has to be a pull situation. You have to communicate to others why this is good for them. You have to convince other people why they should be having this. And that is a harder thing to do. And one way of doing that is to show people how they could either make money or improve their reputation by making this wireless community work together. The question is that the right motivation? And Harold, I think you asked some of the same questions. So, how do we get people to move in this direction? The question is, do we push them or do we pull them? And pulling is more of an idea of leadership, of pulling people along to get them to do what you want them to. Now, the business person, I can tell you, doesn't care about free software at all. I can go and talk to them my whole day and night about free software, and they really don't care. What they do care about is making money or saving money. So if I can convince them that free software will give them a better solution for less money and make them have more customers or treat their customers better, then I win. Somebody mentioned in here that the president of a company doesn't read email. That's right, they don't. They have secretaries who read the email, decide what's spam, what's not important, what should go to a vice president, stuff like that, and then they print out the email for the president that they think the person should be reading. So a lot of these top people don't use the facilities that you're creating. They have no idea what it does for them for the most part, particularly when it comes to things like email, accessing records. Do they watch TV? You bet they do. That's something they do. They listen to music, they watch TV, they do things not necessarily thinking what we think about as technical. I run the Greater New Hampshire Linux Users Group, or at least I used to. I passed it on to somebody else because I was too busy to run it in reality, and that's another point of Harold's, that it got to a point where I enjoyed running it, but it was failing because of me. So I turned it over to somebody else. Normally we have a meeting of about 15 to 20 people, talking about free software, talking about systems administration, talking about that type of stuff. We advertised a meeting about Myth TV, which is a TiVo on steroids made out of free software, and we had 60 people show up. 3 to 4 times the number of people show up at our meeting, because it was something that they saw, that they wanted, that affected their day-to-day life. So does the president of a company care about free software? No. They care about delivering more services at a cheaper price. And in the case of education, it may mean saving $600 a year per student because they don't have to deliver printed books. It may mean that they can offer distance learning to their people. It may mean that they can canvass their electorate to see what they want to do. It may mean more security for their country and more control over what they're doing. That's what they care about. And how do we gain their respect and control? You need to write and publish and show what you're doing. Teddy Roosevelt once said, "Speak softly but carry a big stick." My feeling is that you should speak loudly and don't beat people up too much. You guys are doing lots of great stuff. But I was talking to somebody here at the conference, and I said, "You need to write up what you're doing." And I said, "I hate writing." Then find a ghostwriter. Write more. Get more information out there about what you're doing. Now, other platitudes. One working example is working well is worth 10,000 poorly working examples. I would suggest that what you want to do is create something where the person looks at it and says, "That's what I want." I remember thinking to myself one time as I got off an airplane, I'd really like to have a system. As I walked off the airplane, I kind of waved my PDA around, and it would be programmed with all of the best restaurants of the food that I like in this city. So that I could say, it would know what type of food I liked, which is Ethiopian, by the way. And it would list for me all of the best Ethiopian cities in the city and where they were. As I walked down the gangplank of the airplane into the airport, it would know that. It would know where I was supposed to pick up my luggage. It would know where I was supposed to pick up the taxi cab, what door I was supposed to go out to. All the things I normally spend about 20 or 30 minutes wandering around the airport trying to figure out, my PDA would know right there. That is what the businessman wants. That would be impressive to them. And finally, even 10,000 examples that work well are useless if nobody knows about them and why they're working that way. And finally, there's the coolness factor. Recently, I was reading a book by somebody, and they said, we need to have something which is, and pardon the language, fucking cool. Not just cool, but really outstanding cool. The type of cool that stirs people's passions, the type of cool that says, that's exactly what I want. And if you put your effort into creating that, then people will really sit up and take notice. So what I would like is to see a coffee house / Brazilian barbecue station that would allow you to have live band and dances broadcast to the wireless community around you. You could broadcast local music. You could advertise local restaurants. It manages an LTSP server for about 100 customers to make using the computer as easy as using the telephone. My parents spend about 37% of their time using the computer just fixing it, making it work. I want to make the computer as easy to use as a telephone, that the most you have to learn is how to use it, not how to install it, not how to fix viruses, not how to back it up, not how to do all that crap that people have to do with computers. And I think that that particular thing should be done by a systems administrator who is trained to do that, but also is paid to do it. It creates a local job for a local systems administrator who gets paid to do that work. And then other tasks that the person does gets extra money for them. And I would like the client system to be so simple to install that it basically is just plugging it into the wireless network, if you will, and booting it. And then I want to duplicate that 1,000,000 times. I want to create 1 million to 2 million jobs in a little country called Brazil. That's what I want to do. I want to do it with no money needed from the government. It would actually be provided by private industry. And then projects like the 1 laptop per child and other projects for people that can't afford it would be leveraged on top of that. Nobody would even know they were there. I want to have it incrementally implementable, so you look at the long-term plan, but you can implement it over a period of time. And I want to have it as an open business model because this job is so big that there's no company that can do it all at once. So everybody's going to have to contribute. That's okay, because there's lots of money to be made. And I like it to be very green, because when you put the next 1 billion computers online at 450 watts apiece, that's 450 billion watts. You need a hydroelectric plant as big as a tupu to be able to manage that. Okay? We can't use that on the Earth. We need something of lower power. I would like to have something that fires the imagination. OLPC fired the imagination. No matter what you thought about it, you had to think about it because it was every place. And that was a great contribution. Let's have an even bigger one. Let's have digital inclusion to the world and challenge people to tell us why we can't do it. And I'd like to have a spectacular demonstration, something that would make people sit back on their rubber heels, something that is cool, something that is stellar, something that is Star Trek, and something that would make Roddenberry proud. That's it. Thank you very much.
So, what's your name?